What's new? Anything good?
Oh, wow. The only thing is,
It started here, then went there, then went there.
wait, the chairs?
No, I didn't move that chair.
Was the 22nd?
The chair went to there.
Yeah, I think
She left it. Revels begin.
I'm going to open the meeting of the Chelmsford Planning Board this May 22nd. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with the applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and participation is provided as a courtesy, this meeting will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Also, this meeting will be televised live by Chelmsford Telemedia and will be available on demand for a future viewing pleasure. We're going to open with public input. Items that are not on our planning board, but are within the jurisdiction of the planning board, are available to be discussed in this public input session.
So there is a gentleman that's on that could introduce himself again.
Thank you. My name's Doug Chandler, 47 Augusta Way, North Chelmsford, and I'm the Chelmsford rep to the Middlesex Canal Commission. So the Middlesex Canal Commission, an association, and the Mass DOT, and an ad hoc group called the Friends of Rail Trails and Towpaths are working on the idea of getting a couple of short multi-use trails, bike paths established in the area of Lowell that would connect up dead-end trails that all kind of come into Lowell and die here. Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is beautiful until you get under Route 3 and you're into Lowell, and then it's coming along as far as Target, but then it kind of peters out and you just have to ride around city streets. There's a trail that comes up from Alewife and the Concord Reformatory and stuff like that goes up through Billerica called Yankee Doodle, and they're working on that over there.
Sir,
they're all
is this pertaining to an issue that's under our jurisdiction? It's not clear to me that it is.
Okay. I was going to ask if when the 191 River Neck is reopened, I was going to ask if we could get the Chelmsford BPAC to take a part in that. If you could allow the BPAC and to represent this trail idea as an easement in the order of conditions when you start up 191 again.
Okay.
So I think what you read in the paper, I think it misspoke. I believe they're looking for, they're going to go in front of the select board in the ZBA for the 40B, which is what the paper discussed. So you may want to talk to them, because if they're going through a 40B, that won't come in front of the planning board.
Okay. Well, thank you. In that case,
great idea.
We'll have to see if these people apply, and thank you for that tip, and I'll make sure that we get to the right board to try to get a short easement across their property, which would be a deal breaker on the. Okay, thank you very much. I'll get off.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
And
bye.
Just for the record, I will note that Paul McDougall is on the Zoom call, and the rest of us are present, other than Joel, who is not yet present, the associate member. Okay, is there anyone else wanting to speak during public input? Anyone else on the Zoom call? Seeing no one.
No one on Zoom for public input.
Okay. Then we will proceed to the agenda. We're opening with a request for 199, 195, 199 to 201 Riverneck Road, looking for an extension of the statutory time to take final action regarding the definitive subdivision. Is there someone here from DIV Riverneck? Oh, and for the record, Joel is present.
It's moving on up.
I don't see anyone on Zoom representing DIV either.
Okay. Should we wait for them to be here, or shall we?
I can tell you that they were provided notice as this would be on the agenda. They asked for some clarity during the week as to what this agenda item meant and what may take place. I expected someone to be here, but I think that may...
Did they mention that they were going to be here?
No, they said they would let me know. You can certainly table it and give them the benefit of the doubt that they show up. Or you can take it up as it's on the agenda.
Well, my understanding is they have presented a definitive subdivision and didn't, at the time that they presented it, want the public hearing to be opened. And now it's a year later, so we are in bringing it forward. Up till now, the prior zoning is frozen, so they would have an opportunity to request that we extend their freeze of the prior zoning as a courtesy to them. Is that correct?
Not exactly. The submission of the definitive subdivision was the second step in the required statutory process for them to obtain zoning freeze. The fact that the hearing has never opened and the board has not issued a decision is the remaining part of that process.
Okay.
So over the last year plus, they've continued to express a desire not to proceed with the opening of the public hearing. During that time, they have been undergoing an internal process to determine the next steps. Part of that was a request for proposals to purchase, which took place, I think, ended last month. And several months ago, I engaged with them and told them that we were coming up on a year, and I'd like to get this back in front of the planning board for the board's formal update, discussion, and potential vote. So that's what tonight's agenda is. The board has two choices. The board can either continue to grant the extension, basically delaying the opening of the hearing for the definitive subdivision, or you can deny the extension, which will essentially mean that the planning board is willing and prepared to open that hearing and engage in that review process. If you choose the latter, then Davis has two choices. They can either agree to open the hearing and begin to send representatives and conduct peer review, or they can choose to withdraw.
Okay.
And wait a minute, when does that clock start ticking? It hasn't yet, or has?
No, they've been requesting extensions, so the clock has basically been stayed since March 30th of last year.
And that 8 years starts when we approve this, or?
8 years?
Yes.
That's the third and final step in order to achieve the
If we
zoning
approve
freeze.
the
Yes.
extension.
No.
The subdivision.
Once the subdivision is approved, the zoning is frozen for 8 years.
Right, so zoning freeze has not started yet. they reserve their right
Okay.
by submitting the definitive
Well,
subdivision.
I would like to have a conversation about whether we would like to grant their requested extension.
I think at this point, their 8 years has turned into 9 years.
Right.
And I think it's time to start the hearing.
Mike Walsh?
No, how does this play into, isn't this the same
two
site that's doing something else?
completely unrelated issues.
This is not, there's two different properties?
No, it's
Same
the
property, but
property.
this is not needed for the
Okay.
40B.
So it's not needed for that. Okay.
Yeah.
We can open it up and just continue it and start the clock. And
Well,
have
you
it come to the
wouldn't
next
be,
meeting.
you wouldn't be opening the hearing tonight. It still needs to be legal advertisements and a
Legally,
butter,
yeah,
a butter
posted.
notification.
We would be voting to deny
The extension.
or to approve the further extension of the stay of zoning freeze.
Okay.
So then that would, then we'd have to have a post a public hearing, and then have a public hearing for what, 30 days?
We would, where are we, end of May? So by the end of June, the hearing would be scheduled to be open.
Okay.
I would like to get this moving and get it
Yeah.
on the
Anita?
agenda for
Yeah, I
end of
think we
June.
should get it moving. I mean, they may decide, as you said, to just pull it too, because if they're going down a different path.
Right. But we can just clean it up.
Right. I should, yeah, I'd open.
Mike?
I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other. I mean, I see no reason to deny it just to bang them over the head with a stick. On the other hand, I have a feeling that other events are going to bypass this, and it's all going to be relatively minor to irrelevant.
Aren't we voting on the fact to open up the public hearing, to
Right.
discuss it?
No, we're,
voting-
yeah, we're
we're
voting
not
on
voting on
not
that.
delaying the, not further granting them an
Either
extension.
to
Right.
stop the clock or not to stop it.
But we're technically
Which would-
opening up a
yeah,
public hearing.
which would then open
We're
up
not
the-
denying it, and we're not approving the subdivision today.
No, absolutely
the
not,
process.
absolutely not. But what it does is it forces them to come in sooner rather than later, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right, but they're requesting an extension to November at this
That
point.
seems a little long.
They're requesting an extension to the end of June to open the hearing. And
Okay.
then the November extension is the extension to allow the planning board time to take final action.
Which is
I think
certainly
a
reasonable.
definitive
time.
subdivision is 6 months.
Actually, it's August for the open.
Oh, okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, August, right. So what you're really voting on tonight is the August, whether you want to extend this beyond August or open the hearing prior to August.
Yeah, my personal opinion, I don't support extending it. I think it's been, as we said, others have said, it's been over a year at this point, so.
Okay.
That's
So,
John, this is
Paul?
open a public hearing. I agree with John.
Okay. I'll take a motion.
I'll move that we deny.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Paul,
and Paul?
Paul's an aye.
Okay, so
Aye.
unanimous. So that will set us up to open the public hearing at the end of June, is that correct, Evan?
I don't have the letter, was it end of August? Is that what you said, Chris?
They wanted to extend it to the first meeting in August.
Okay.
So
So I will circle with them, update them on tonight's vote. And if they so choose to want to proceed with opening the hearing, then we'll figure out a date prior
Yeah, but-
to the first meeting in August.
can we target the end of June?
Yeah,
Sure?
why?
Yeah.
Okay. No new public hearings, and then we have continued public hearings. First, we're gonna table the site plan and special permit rules. It will remain on the agenda, and hopefully we can clean up some of these open public hearings, and we can cycle back around to that agenda item. I'll take a motion.
Yeah, I will move to grant a continuance on 10 Hildreth.
Oh, no, first on the
Oh.
site plan and special permit rules.
Oh,
right?
okay, you're right, that probably should be the first one. I will
Second?
grant.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Paul?
Forget to mention the names of who's doing the motion in a second for the AI.
The motion was made by Mike Raisbeck.
Yep.
And the second was Chris Lavalley. And the previous administrative review was,
Mike Raisbeck and Chris Lavalley.
I moved it.
and you
Same thing.
seconded
Yeah,
as
It was
well?
Mike and Chris, yep.
So both of those were. Okay, next up, we have 10 Hildreth. We have a request from them for a continuance.
Yeah, the letter seemed sensible enough. I'll move to grant the continuance. When would that be to? Did they stated a date?
I think it was next meeting, which is June 12th.
Can I suggest June 26th?
Sure.
Because the Board of Health is meeting on June 3rd to discuss that topic. And I can't imagine
Yeah, that they're going to get the report done.
that that would be complete for us in only a few days, so.
Okay.
I will make it the
So we
26th.
have a motion to move 10 Hildreth to the 26th of June. Do I have a second?
I will second.
That was Mike Raisbeck and and Chris Lavalley, sorry. Again, all in favor?
Aye.
And
Aye.
Paul? Okay.
Aye.
Unanimous, including Paul, on the
Looks
Zoom?
just so comfortable there.
I know. Look like
It's nice in the shade.
lounger. All right, next up, we have 110 Middlesex Street, Suite 1, Marchi LLC requesting a special permit per section 195-8B1 to operate an outdoor contractor's yard that has been operating actually since 2019, and any other zoning relief deemed necessary. The site is located in the CB zoning district and is shown as parcel ID on map 14, block 19, lot 11. So we have some letters here. Do we have someone from Marchi LLC to present to us?
I don't see anybody here. I believe the attorney is Doug Hausler, I believe.
I think that's true as well.
But there is no one here at this point for that. Maybe they thought it started at 7.
Okay. So should we move ahead?
Yeah.
All right, and we'll come back to this later. Next up, we have 270 Billrica Road, DH Holdings and Company, looking for a modification of a minor mod, or modifying from a minor mod from June 14th, 2023. I see Casey here.
You know if Doug's online?
Doug Duchesne is not on yet.
Excellent. Okay. All right. Good evening to the board. Casey Ferrero with Harvestein Hudson. So we were last before you a few weeks ago. We left that meeting with the understanding that our main objective in the time since would be to work with Beta to provide a scope for third-party peer review. We did do so at the end of last week and have received back correspondence, which was actually a little more formal than we anticipated. It was an actual proposal addressed to Evan and David. We think the proposal encompasses everything we thought it would, so we are in agreement with that proposal. So we believe that part for us is satisfied, so we'd like to discuss it with you if you have any questions.
And for the board, Rob Smith, the LSP peer reviewer, is on Zoom.
Since we just got this today, can we get Rob to summarize it?
Sure. This is Robert Smith here with Beta Group. So as far as the scope of work, what was proposed was roughly weekly inspections, during periods when excavation is going to be getting into areas of contaminated groundwater, contaminated soil. And, we also did include a couple other inspections, so estimated about 10 inspections, during sort of those RAM activities. And that would just be to verify that the scope of work, that was proposed by Rue Associates, is being followed, during the execution of the project. The other part of that is really more of the sort of a civil component to oversee the installation of the focal point system. And so we've, included costs for a resident engineer to observe those activities. I spoke with Phil Paradis. He sort of estimated there could be a couple days of oversight, and that may not be continuous. And that depends a bit on, perhaps the phasing of the contractor. But we felt as though that would be adequate to to confirm the installation. I think we understand the concerns of the town and the board, that we want to make sure that that's where that is installed is appropriate, and that it's installed without that it's tight and within specifications. We did propose to do the work sort of on a time and materials basis, as we may not need to complete sort of full day inspections necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a quick summary. Be happy to answer any questions about that.
I read it as 80 hours total. Did I read that wrong?
Yeah, so I put in, we estimated about 10 days of inspection during the, again, the RAM activities, and another 2 days during the, so yeah, that's probably about 80 to 100 hours is what I was estimating for that. And then another, the other 2 days, that's another perhaps 20 hours of field inspection time. We did carry some time, to complete sort of, to document our findings. Mm-hmm. And assuming there'd be some communication, mm-hmm. We did perhaps with the town and the contractor, with the applicants, their consultants and engineers.
Seems like everyone's in accord. Anyone have any questions or comments?
I guess I could also provide a little bit of detail in that we did meet with the site contractor regarding those figures in the RAM plan, so we have kind of an accurate timeline of how long it'll take to complete all these activities. Mm-hmm. And we did keep it a little bit on the conservative end, so it might not take that long, but we wanted to make sure that we had a scope that would encompass as much as was necessary.
Makes sense.
The only question I have is, I might have missed it, but who are they going to be sending the report to at the town that's going to enforce this?
I believe it's going to be a
For like
condition.
the logs and things,
Who
or
is in
during
the
the
condition?
building?
Who is
I
it
believe
going
it's going to be conservation, planning board, probably engineering as well.
to go to DEP, or is it, who's this fall under?
This will go directly to the town.
Who would the town?
It's going to be, just as Casey said, the Conservation Commission via the agent, the planning board via myself, and likely DPW via stormwater.
What about a factory startup on the jellyfish? Is that included? Is there a factory startup on something that technical?
I'm having a hard time understanding.
Yeah.
No, no.
Factory
He asked about a
startup?
factory startup on the jellyfish.
Yeah.
What the jellyfish situation? There's someone from the factory, because they're not really used that often. Will they come out and guide you through like how you set that up? Is there any guidance? Is what I'm saying.
So the installation of the jellyfish isn't all that technical. It's an installation of a typical subsurface vault concrete structure, and then you add in the cartridges that Contact will sell us. So the cartridges are what does all the.
So the owner's manual is just good enough? Okay.
Yes.
All
Yep.
right.
So were you questioning who this is all going to be reporting back to during the construction or on an
Yeah,
ongoing
we'll get-
basis or both?
Bader's gonna be doing
Okay.
a report, so then
Right,
at the
right,
end of it, who's it go to? Because it's not gonna come back to Boston and say, oh, they're not doing this. Who's it going
Right.
to the day by day for them to go to in the town? That's what I wanted a person.
The primary point of contact is going to be the conservation agent
Okay,
and then myself.
great.
And can we codify also the DPW?
Yes.
Okay.
You're good?
So what does this need for our, does it need formal approval from us? Imagine it
So
does.
you have a draft decision, hard copy today. As I mentioned in the email this afternoon, today's version is based upon a previous version that was attached to the previous agenda. My suggestion is maybe we spend some time reviewing the special conditions tonight.
I think that's a great idea. Clean it up, pull it together.
So that is the top of the third page. So the first special condition is codifying that any applicable conditions to the original approval, which was landscaping, lighting, a variety of other things, parking, things of that nature, and whatever conditions will remain in place. And then the special conditions then go on to design and pre-construction. Many of these are taken, basically copy and paste directly from the commission's approval. David worked with the applicant. David also worked with, I believe, Beta to some extent to craft some of these more involved conditions. These are the ones that I think are relevant to planning board business. There were a variety of other conditions in the commission decision that weren't directly relevant to planning board.
Nesting turtles and the like.
If applicable, correct. So yeah, 2 through 4 are design and pre-construction, fairly straightforward. The next set of conditions are related to construction management. Number 5 speaks to management of the construction site, in particular calling out dust control. Number 6 refers to if there's any changes to the plan as submitted. And it articulates that these changes can be required by the town, state agencies, or introduced by the applicant, and that the board reserves the right to determine whether those changes require a new filing with the planning board. Number 6 refers to the soil and groundwater management plan and the RAM. These are incorporated into the decision.
Evan, that's number 7, I believe.
I'm sorry, number 7, yep. 6, we covered 6, 7. Number 8 is similar, incorporating the long-term pollution prevention plan and the stormwater management system operation and maintenance plan. These are codified within the planning board's decision.
So, in this area here, should we be adding that Bader be on site?
Let's go through them. I believe it may be in here, but let's go through them and then we'll figure that out.
Okay.
9 refers to all of the during construction daily logs and maintenance logs are submitted to DPW. DPW, as you recall, is on site routinely during all phases of construction. And the 10th and final construction-related special condition is the submission of the illicit discharge compliance statement prior to occupancy being signed off on. Then there's a variety of perpetual conditions. These are conditions that are remain in place in perpetuity. 11 refers to if there's a proposed change of use, particularly anything that is related to a LUPL that would be not consistent with this decision or the prior decision. The board would have reserve the right to require a new hearing. 12 refers to any of these perpetual conditions. The board reserves the right to retain outside peer review consultant services to monitor compliance. 13 refers to any of the continued engagement from the applicant to DEP wastewater would be copied to the board. 14 refers to any leakage from the stormwater system may require submission to the board for corrective action. That's a pretty detailed condition here. It refers to a dry weather test plan.
Do you want me to go over that one a little bit?
Yeah, please.
All right, so during our Conservation Commission meetings, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about this condition, and really what it's trying to do is ensure that the stormwater management system is watertight as it is supposed to be. So the idea is that during high water season, but a dry spell of time, we're going to review the outlet of the system and make sure that there's no water coming out of the outlet of the system. Because if there's water coming out when there's been no rain, some water is getting in there. So what we're going to do is review that and make sure, and if there is, we agreed that we would test that water for PFAS. And the idea of testing water for PFAS was we're going to have wells in the ground around the site. So depending on the concentrations of what might be coming out of there, might help us isolate and locate where the stormwater management system needs fixing. So that's the gist of that condition.
Okay. Number 15 is related to prior to occupancy. Again, we don't know who the tenant is at this point, that the tenant needs to meet with myself and the agent to discuss the compliance related to this decision, the long-term operation. It's a maintenance plan that, as you likely are aware, there's a lot of customized procedures and protocols within those two plans. Number 16 extends that to a future conveyance where a new purchaser of the property would also be required to engage with the town so that they are fully aware of the associated plans that are incorporated into the decision. Number 17, I think, is a duplicate.
I'm sorry, can we go back to 15?
Yep.
The logs are going to you, Evan, but not to Chris? I mean, not to the conservation
They're
agent?
going to the conservation agent in community.
It says they shall meet with, but then they'll be
Yeah, so
submitted via
15,
email.
let's see, all inspection shall be submitted.
15 is like a prior to occupancy. They must meet with the town representatives to discuss the requirements of the long-term pollution
Yeah,
prevention plan and
the
operation
last,
and maintenance.
the last sentence in that, the commission has the same exact language. Their decision says to the agent.
Okay, fine.
17, I think, is a duplicative of a prior condition, so we can probably strike that one. And then, per Mike Walsh's comment, I think we should insert the scope that we reviewed tonight, probably as new condition number 11 under construction management. That would be the third party.
And you can reference this letter too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yep,
For this
yep, yep.
date and
Yep.
from Beta.
So that's a third-party field peer review per May 22nd beta letter.
So you actively have to just the field superintendent would have to coordinate that with Beta so that they're not doing things without him not being on
Also,
site.
part of the scope of work states that we have to provide them prior to the start of work,
Schedule.
a detailed schedule, and then throughout the work, any changes to that schedule has to be sent to the conservation agent as soon as feasible.
Great.
And general condition number 1, not a special condition. The first one there is a pre-construction meeting. So that's another step where we would share all the contact information, go over all the plans, procedures, and protocols. But that's a formal meeting with DPW, Stormwater, myself, Conservation.
Actually, can we go back just to 14? When is the plan, the dry weather test plan being submitted? The applicant shall submit to the board a proposed plan.
Also, what we did with the Conservation Commission was we said we would update the operation and maintenance plan of the riprap, which is at the flared end sections. So that is part of the operation and maintenance of that. Every year, I think I put during May, which is during high water season, after a spell of 5 days with no stormwater, no rainwater, is when they'll perform that review, that check.
Yeah, but when do you submit the plan? Is that?
The plan, I believe, is the O&M. Conservation wanted it in the O&M. So that's the plan of action to do, is just maintain it as part of the operation and maintenance plan.
So that level of details in the O&M plan.
Yep.
So that's, that O&M plan we have now, or we will have?
I have
for-
revised it, and we'll send it in.
Okay, prior to the decision? Okay, that was what I was getting at. All right, thank you.
Is that the only document that,
It's the only outstanding revision, yeah.
so under page 1 and page 2, what submission is that? Under number 4?
You likely don't have it listed. You haven't submitted it.
At all?
No.
Okay.
It'll be an updated date. It'll be part of the May supplemental data report, because it's still going to be dated May, so you probably have it encompassed when you have the May supplemental data report referenced here.
Okay, so that's what it's called, a supplemental data report?
That's just it's Appendix A of the supplemental data report.
I thought it was going to be a separate O&M plan, a standalone.
No, it's an appendix of the supplemental data report, so you can pull it out and use it as a
Okay.
standalone document if you'd like to.
Okay, so,
And I know I'd briefly mentioned before about some sort of a guarantee or escrow or something, particularly for the expensive part, the jellyfish replacement. And where would that go? I guess we need to
Do you
decide
have any
what that
idea
is.
how long you'd want that bond or escrow in place?
Well, the objective would be, because essentially what we've done is we've shifted the infiltration, the function that the infiltration was performing to these, different filters, including the jellyfish stuff. That, because the jellyfish in particular is something that is expensive to replace, that we wanted to be sure that it was done. And so we wanted to have some money set aside so that it was sure to be done. That's really what we're trying to get at, is because now there's so much greater reliance on actually changing out these filters, that we want to make sure that the changing out of the filters happens. And so originally I was thinking, do like 1 year, 2 years of maintenance, but I think I'm really now more thinking, let's just look at what are the high price items that need to be done.
Right.
And then just say, we'll cover one of these.
I think we just began that discussion last meeting.
Right, so I kind of envisioned what it would be a full, in the event that there was a lapse of operation maintenance, there's a fund to fully maintain that jellyfish unit,
Yeah.
which would be essentially the 3-year cycle, because the cartridges
Yes.
last 3 years.
Yeah.
So what we could do is the full cost of replacement for all those cartridges, plus 3 years of the yearly maintenance.
Yeah.
That would be, I think, sufficient to do what you want to do.
And the ones that are in the catch basins,
Yep,
those
Fabco units.
yeah, how often do those get replaced and how much do
Yearly.
those cost?
The units themselves cost $200 or $300, I believe.
Okay, so not really.
Not high, no.
So we could catch that kind of activity in the O&M report.
Yep.
Okay, I think that sounds reasonable.
So we're talking about in perpetuity, but a 3-year cycle. That,
Yeah, we're just setting up a fund to make sure that we're essentially, the applicant is providing the seed money for it, and then after that, it's up to the person to make sure.
what I have is full cost plus 3-year maintenance.
Yeah,
That's what.
It would be cost of full cartridge replacement plus a yearly maintenance for a 3-year time
Yeah.
period.
Full cartridge replacement for the 2 jellyfishes?
For the 2 jellyfish
Yeah.
units, correct.
How much do they cost?
I believe it was for every 3 years, somewhere in the range of 13 or 15,000.
So what's your estimate on this escrow at this point?
Probably the 15,000, but
15.
I'll get you a more defined number here in a second.
Okay, and so just so I understand, the $15,000 escrow gets established prior to whatever occupancy, let's just
I thought it
Uh,
say.
was gonna be 2 cartridges, and they're $15,000 each.
No, there's several cartridges within each unit. So each unit has, I think the smaller one has 6 and the bigger one probably has 20 or something like that. So each cartridge has a cost, and then, so to replace each cartridge within that unit has to be done every 3 years, so we'll assume the full replacement over a 3 years time period.
So once it's occupied, the first 3 years go by, the town verifies that they're complying with the O&M, what happens? Like, or in other words, what triggers the release or reduction or increase of that 15,000? Or is it just held there in perpetuity until such time as the town documents that they're out of compliance?
Yeah. Good question.
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my thought was, at least to make sure it's there for the first time.
Okay.
And then after that, so that the owner knows that, that this has to be done.
Okay.
And then after that,
Yeah, I mean, if there is a violation of an O&M, that's a violation of your permit,
yeah,
so you have another avenue.
yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we're essentially looking this as the first 3 years, and then we can revisit it at that time.
Yeah.
Okay. And you want it established, what, prior to occupancy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that sounds all right to you guys?
Yes.
Casey, you had also shown either us or the commission the excavation exhibit.
Yes.
Is that updated in the plans?
Is
Or
that
is that a
updated?
separate document?
That was a separate exhibit document.
Okay.
I think that just came today, right?
Can we get that added to the,
I sent that to Evan officially midway through last week or Tuesday
Yeah.
last week.
no,
something
but can
like
we
that.
get it added to the plans as well, so that
Like on the tail end, just as an exhibit
Yeah.
to the plans?
that way the construction folks have it?
What was the name of that exhibit? What was the
I believe
title?
that was called excavation exhibit, but
It's just the slides that came today, right?
No, it was something earlier.
What I'll do is I'll add it as a standalone exhibit
Yeah,
to the,
Yeah.
to the decision.
Yeah,
yeah.
And that's being used as part of the monitoring plan, right? Yeah. That exhibit's being used for the contractor to
Right.
meet with Beta and,
yeah, so that's the exhibit that we used to discuss with the contractor. So I got the jellyfish filter numbers. It was 13 to 14,000 in cartridge replacement every 3 years. So if we want to establish, and a yearly maintenance would be 5,000 for the vac trucks to come and vac them out every year. So if you want to establish based on that, we can establish based on that.
we changing what we already talked about?
Didn't mean to jump back on you, but I just found the exact numbers, sorry.
But he was just giving us the exact numbers.
Okay, so the 15 number's good.
Well,
no,
I think,
18.
well, if there is a violation,
5 times 3.
the 15, the full replacement of the cartridges takes care of the previous 3 years of mist. So replacing the cartridges would set you back at a functioning system. So if there was a missed maintenance and it wasn't performing, that 15,000 would guarantee enough to get the system back to functioning.
Okay, got it. Sounds good. And what, so are the exhibits that you sent us, are those not included in the soil and management plan? I mean, what is the indication that someone has as to where the areas are that we need to be concerned about?
So one of the conditions in the conservation approval is that we have to provide to David ahead of time, as well as the contractor, those precise exhibits. So one of the conditions there is that we have to give it to the conservation agent as well as the contractor. So if I figured we could put a similar condition as part of the planning board approval.
Okay, I was just wondering why it's not included with the soil and management plan, because
There is an exhibit that's very similar that he drafted. So it is part of the soil groundwater management plan, it's just not the HSH ones that we provided.
Okay, okay. And they are the same thing?
They're actually, his is more conservative than mine is.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
All right, and I've got one typo on fact number 4. Incorporated, I think should be incorporated.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so Rob Smith, your LSP still on the call. If you have any technical questions or what if questions, obviously the applicant is here. If we think we're done with receiving information, usually the next step is to close the hearing. You could vote your draft decision tonight, but I will, if you choose to do that, I will provide a updated version for your ratification at your next meeting, if that's how you want to proceed.
Because of the complexity of this decision and the fact that we didn't have it too soon before the meeting, can we keep the hearing open one more meeting? Just vote on the decision next meeting and have it attached to the agenda?
You can certainly do that. What the board has also done in the past is if you think that you're inclined to vote the approval, you can do that, but we wouldn't be drafting the decision tonight. We would wait until the next meeting to actually review, deliberate, and vote the decision.
Right, but so the decision that we've just drafted hasn't been published yet. And because of the complexity of this,
Sure,
it
I
might be a
understand
good
what you're
idea
saying.
to have more eyes on it to see if there's anything else we missed.
Yeah, as I mentioned, this version is a little bit different than the previous
Yeah.
posted version.
And that's why continuing it to next meeting, having a quick, is everything okay on this decision? And then voting.
One more time
And
through.
we're still getting the O and M plan too, right?
Yeah.
So. we
The
would
O and M
wanna get that.
appendix, and also the additional condition 11. And then something about the performance guarantee, right?
So it'd just be good to have all those documents together that one last time on the agenda. Just for one final review before we close the public hearing.
So
Make sense?
Yep.
I'll make a motion to continue this to, what date?
June 12th
June 12th.
Second?
at 7:30.
Motion by Anita. Seconded by Chris.
Paul again.
Am I echoing?
Yep.
Yep.
Right. Aye for me. You hear me? Aye.
He was an aye.
He was an aye.
And everybody else, all in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Okay.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have 93 Brick Kiln Road, D&D Homes LLC requesting site plan approval for the construction of 49,910 square foot industrial warehouse building with integrated surface parking, loading facilities, and on-site infrastructure improvements. So the site is located in the IA district, shown as parcel ID map 88, block 271, lot 3, consists of approximately 9.63 acres. The applicant requests special permits per Article 11, major business complex, Article 14, aquifer protection, Article 5, off-street parking and loading, and site plan review per 195-104, and any other permit relief deemed necessary.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Christine Hung, Reamer and Bronstein. With me tonight, I have Brian Goudreau, our site civil engineer from Hancock Associates, John Higgins, our licensed site professional from Higgins Environmental, and Ender Sariclay, our representative from the applicant, D&D Homes. At the last meeting, there was a request made by the board to have our LSP's report peer-reviewed by Beta. That Beta provided a report that was issued to us in May 3rd, and Higgins Environmental provided a response to the report, and so we would just like to update the board with the response. So I'd like to call up John Higgins to provide the board with the background and the response to Beta's peer review.
Thank you very much, Christine. Good evening, members of the planning board. My name is John Higgins with Higgins Environmental. I'm a Massachusetts licensed site professional on behalf of D&D Homes LLC. So as you all know, we had initial report back in March for our review of the environmental assessment required by the Board of Health. In my opinion of that, in terms of an LSP, what that meant in terms of our regulations. And we provided that to the board, in addition to the Board of Health and Conservation Commission. Each of them have weighed in. Board of Health has issued a letter of no additional actions required other than, basic kind of holistic lawn care, and that particularly that we actually are connected to municipal sewer, which they are, which is a pretty important criteria. Conservation Commission we met with twice, and the last meeting was more along the lines of order of condition to be forthcoming. David was really busy, talked about turtle nesting areas and things like that, and we've met with a planning board, how many times, once or twice? Once? I had met once. Okay, other people have met many times with you folks, okay. But me as an LSP, I met once, we did the peer review, we didn't meet the last meeting, and I actually wanted to take that opportunity to actually provide what I have done, which is a May 17th response to Beta's review, just because I thought it'd be more courteous than having a kind of a tit-for-tat meeting of back and forth ad hoc comments. I wanted to give the board and Beta the benefit of what my thoughts were again. And so the net result is that there really wasn't any additional information provided by the peer review that changed my opinion as an LSP, looking at it from the first day I came here before the planning board. And now, having said that, I did take that opportunity to add some additional information I thought would help the board, the additional groundwater contour maps, things that I talked about in the meeting, this is that ad hoc kind of part that I thought would actually be helpful to see in person. So I included 3 groundwater contour maps. I am a hydrogeologist, that's what my training is, in addition to being an LSP. And yeah, you can see part of that there. And so, but that's consistent with the groundwater flow direction that we had before, that I indicated, but it wasn't depicted on a map. It was more like a micro scale. So groundwater flow is consistent with surface water flow in the area. It goes south-southeasterly away from these potable wells. And so I guess I'll talk too about, so I did, I spoke yesterday with Rob at length. And I thought it went longer than I thought, Rob. I didn't have much time, but we gave some time here, yeah, and maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that. But there were some kind of takeaways that he wanted me to look at again, which I had looked at before. But yeah, okay, I will. And I did look at things again, and my opinion still hasn't changed. So he asked me to look at a section of the regs that talk to releases and threats of releases that don't require notification. they have a definition for what a release is, and we don't have any of those. You know, this isn't a cider vessel like a tank that has a leak, or a tank with 3 legs that might fall down and spill oil and hazardous material. So by definition, in addition to not having a contaminant impact above any reportable concentration, this is under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan in Chapter 21E, we don't have any, lost my train of thought there, but it's not a contaminated site by any definition that I can see. It's not a release site. That's where my thing is. It's not a source of release. This is a residential property. The data assessment we have doesn't indicate that there's some smoking gun here that no one knows about. You know, we have an upland center of the property that's basically dry bedrock. It all flows toward the edges, and we have 4 wells that are around the edges, consistent with what the Board of Health asked us to do. And so, you know, I think we've been really diligent in respect to what is a residential property. So this residential property predated UPS Road, and you know, it happens to be being developed now. It's an industrial zoned area. It's a warehouse. So the activity and use in my term we say activity and use limitations. That doesn't apply, but the activities and uses are pretty benign from a industrial use perspective. It's a warehouse with paved area. There's no oil and hazardous material uses. There's no dry cleaning. There's none of those things that are like, don't do these ever here. You know, there's no landfills, nothing scary. So, and I also do think, you know, I went through and I had to look at, you know, there were some other comments that Beta had about the infiltration. Basically, the peer review focused on MW1, which is on the bottom right of your screen, in that infiltration area, and this came down to the contaminant spreading. We don't have contamination by any definition that I quoted and referenced in here. It's not reportable. Spreading, okay, but that's the area that we focused and talked about, and I looked at that holistically, in depth as a licensed site professional and hydrogeologist, and I think the quantity and quality of stormwater handling is pretty good right now in terms of it's equally dispersed. It has a pretty good representation of pre-development conditions. This is part of the zoning board, the planning board work. So I felt pretty comfortable with where things are laid out right now in terms of reproducing those natural flow conditions. And I think what we see for a little bit of impact in PFAS there, I don't know where that may be coming from. You know, Rob and I talked at length about other things. You know, PFAS are really widely, globally present, and I think that's a story we're going to be hearing about for the rest of our careers. But, you know, it's something you find pretty much everywhere, and I don't see indications that it's from the site. And I don't think contaminant spreading is not contamination, but I think that spreading concern is consistent with the current hydrologic conditions for that area. That's where rainwater tends to flow. And so I think that's an important thing to maintain. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Yeah, one question I have is,
Yes,
the original report had groundwater contours, and those groundwater contours looked quite different than these groundwater contours. So what is the difference between those groundwater contours and these groundwater contours?
Okay, so I think I talked about that in my letter that I just provided, which is one of the reasons why I gave the 3 additional groundwater contour maps. So the groundwater and that wasn't my original intent of my review under the March letter. It was an LSP looking at environmental data. It wasn't to do a hydrogeologic review at the same time. But that came up, Joel, and I addressed it ad hoc in the meeting like we have now, and that I think that's a micro flow, not a macro flow. And, you know, so what they did was they took, and I talked about the type of modeling they probably used, you know, whatever it happened to be, but what they did was they basically took surface water as a groundwater source, a groundwater elevation. And it happened to be top of ice, by the way. So we talk about that in my letters. So
the original groundwater contours were not done by you?
No, they were not.
They were done by somebody else?
They were done by another firm. Yeah.
And that was in your report. And now in this report, these groundwater contours have been done by you?
Yes, I'm a hydrogeologist, and in order to provide additional supporting
Using the
information.
using the same data, presumably there
Using the
wasn't
same
additional
data, using the
testing.
same data, the same surveyed elevations, and as a hydrogeologist, so what we do is we use groundwater elevations to determine what the groundwater flow is, and then once that's determined, we look at what the boundary conditions are, whether they're recharge or no recharge boundaries. In this case, we have a bedrock boundary on one side, and we have a surface water source on the other side, and then we also have differences in geology. There's different soil types that'll make things flow differently. And I try to reflect, and then I take those groundwater contour intervals and make it reflect its surrounding environment, boundary conditions. That's what you see in those three maps.
Yeah, I'd be interested in Rob's opinion then of the groundwater contours that you have done in this.
Rob, do you have an opinion about those?
Oh, did you want to ad hoc, or did you want to have them do it? You're the board, so.
Yeah, Rob, if you could weigh in on your thoughts on that.
Sure. So as far as the most recent contours, so there were 3 different dates. There was one date from December 2023. I think that's actually the one that was just up. And I have a couple concerns about that. I think first is that there was identical hydraulic head noted in both MW2 and MW1. So that was presented as, 107.42. And we're also seeing contours for 107.4. You can just see it to the right of MW1. And that same contour is presented near MW2. However, there's still a groundwater flow direction basically, between those 2 points, showing that it's flowing that way. So I think, the first concern is that really those are at the same elevation. During that event, the second concern is that when we do, as Jonathan knows, when we evaluate groundwater contours, you really need 3 points. And really it certainly appears as though there's a linear interpolation between MW1 and 2. That it's really a 2-point contour, and you cannot resolve the flow direction in that case. And again, we did talk about that in the meeting a bit. Jonathan indicated there are other wells, but they're a pretty good distance. MWB5 was dry. That's not useful. There's no head value there. MW3 and 4, they're pretty far away. Like roughly 300 feet. So that's certainly a concern that contour map may not accurately identify the groundwater flow direction. We look at the subsequent maps. The January 3rd map, we see MW1 does have there's a higher head there. You got 107.24, and then MW2 is 107.21. So that, that's a pretty flat gradient, for that distance, and that's reflected in the spacing of the contours. But again, it's that same concern about, how that interpolation is completed really between these 2 specific points. And that it's hard to know if that's the true groundwater flow direction, certainly in that area. And I think, the following map, January 9th, that was fairly similar, to the previous one.
Yeah, those were the same observations that I had. And so the question then is, would additional points provide a better indication of what the local flow is? Because I think that's what our concern is. Certainly the flow direction, you rightly have identified, the flow direction is important. And if the flow direction is due south, then, essentially it's moving parallel to or slightly away from the zone 2, then it's a much less concern. Where the original contour showed that it was a basically a straight line shot to the zone two. So those are, I would think those would be things that could provide a better indication of what the actual flow direction is. But it's predicated on the idea that, not that we're saying that it is a contaminant or a contaminated site, but what we're saying is that if it were in the zone two, it would be a contamination, and the concern is that with the gradients, that the flow would be, for something that is not considered contamination, not in zone two, would be considered contamination in zone two. That's the concern. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but I think that you were agreeing with that. And so it seems to me that Rob had suggested getting additional points to get a better refinement on what the actual flows are. I think that's a good idea. But what we're really trying to do here is not so much we're certainly not here to regulate MCP. That's not what we're trying to do. We're also actually really not trying to do a hydrogeo study. What we're trying to do is we're trying to identify what is the way in which, when the board approves the site, that it isn't creating a condition with the way the infiltration is set up, that it's going to potentially result in some flow of a material that in zone two would be considered contamination. And so for that reason, some combination of better idea of where it is going and some relocation of infiltration seems like a reasonable thing to do. That's at least the thinking that I've had. And so, Rob, I don't know if you want to add to that at all or not.
The only thing I would add is, and I agree with all that, Joel, and then the only thing, I think something I would add, the information that we can glean from these evaluations is that there's a pretty flat gradient between MW1 and 2, and because of that, so I mean, if in that case, if you do infiltration next to MW1, it's, you're going to get some mounding. It's going to be transient, but that mounding is likely going to dominate, and there could be spreading, and it just, again, we want to raise a concern that certainly there could be some migration there, due to that infiltration. And, I think it's important for the applicant and the board to consider that.
Can I ask, what's the difference between an inferred contour and a contour?
Well, it's in terms of how definitive it is. So a contour is about, it's reasonably definitive on that scale. And then you have interpreted, and then you have inferred. Inferred is kind of on the low beyond interpreted. Okay. So when you look at the contour intervals, you'll see a solid line. That's the contour. And then where it gets dashed, it's interpreted because there's less control points in those areas. And then when it's inferred, I can tell it's up gradient of, but I don't know whereabouts it is. And I show each of those on there, actually.
Yeah, and my concern is that all of the contours in the MW1 area are inferred.
No, that's not true. You have sections of those contours that are solid, and there is a shallow gradient, but that is what the gradient is, and I think it's probably related to surface water supply being pinched a little bit there too, so it does back up a bit, and you have a flatter gradient there. But the reason we can define that is that we have 4 groundwater monitoring wells out here that are similarly screened in the water table zone. We have that go around a bedrock high, which is the control point. So you're going to have, they're very viable groundwater monitoring wells, and I adjusted that to reflect where it's interpreted and inferred that you are approaching on this bedrock high, and so you'll see it interpreted as you go toward the bedrock high. You'll see it solid between where we can triangulate and linear interpretation between points. We have 4 groundwater monitoring wells. 3 is sufficient. We have 4. And we also have other controls, that being that we have data documenting that we have an upland bedrock high, and that we have, it's pretty clear, you got a surface water wetland right next to you that flows. So those are pretty good control points all around. And, to Joel's earlier point, I've already addressed that, using surface water data to determine groundwater flow, particularly when it's top of ice, and it's like 2 to 3 weeks after the groundwater elevations were collected, just really isn't representative data. But that wasn't part of my March report, Joel. That's why I took the opportunity for the follow-up when the question came up on this contaminant spreading, to talk not only about spreading, but to talk about contamination. And I think I've done that, and I wanted to give the board the courtesy of doing that, rather than just talking about it, because I did that in the first meeting, and here we are again today.
So you disagree with the contours by the hydrogeo group that works for the applicant, right? Is that correct? Is that what I'm understanding?
I do not think it is my opinion, they do not accurately reflect groundwater flow directions.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, my thought is, I'm in agreement with Rob. I think because you're creating groundwater mounting conditions where you have a large infiltration, it's a fairly centralized large infiltration. I agree with you. Infiltration is throughout the site. And so it's not all the site getting infiltrated there, but still a significant portion of the site is getting infiltrated there, which is likely because, I think especially because of the flatness of it, is likely going to create some sort of, I would assume, some sort of omnidirectional flow away from it, and that therefore, raises the question of whether the things that were observed in MW1 are going to be flowed into Zone 2 areas. That is the concern.
Which abuts Chelmsford water, right? The property that,
Yeah.
this is all this literally,
And I think too, these contours don't reflect what's happening when they're pumping, right? This is just based on, I assume that when you took those measurements, they weren't, because I think they're seasonal, if I recall correctly. And I think that they pump them in the summer. I don't think they pump them in the winter.
I think it's actually been a few years since they've operated,
Okay.
actually. Yeah,
But if they were to operate them, then I would assume that could affect things as well.
All right, so now we're going to the ad hoc kind of feedback now, which I'm more than happy to do. But, I actually love to talk, and we could be talking a long time, and not just tonight, but other meetings in similar properties. So, what's changed so the Zone 2 boundary is defined by the maximum pumping rate for 180 days, maximum yield you can get at a given approved yield for a well. And you take that to the limits of your hydrologic conditions, which, boundary conditions, recharge boundaries, to the upper limit of the aquifer. So we're not at the upper limit of the aquifer, we're on the side. And right now, the Zone 2 boundary goes to about where that stream channel is, or is now underwater. So the recharge boundary is actually now closer to the potable water supply wells than it is currently. So the Zone 2 boundary would actually be closer to the drinking water, the temporary use drinking water wells than they are right now, if you were to redo those Zone 2 in accordance with Mass DEP approved methods, because they're a recharge boundary. So, if you start pumping and the groundwater starts to decrease, because that's what happens when you pump at the maximum yield, it eventually reaches a point where it has a boundary condition, either recharge or like a bedrock. And when it hits that recharge boundary, that water provides that extra recharge to keep that limit at that location. And so that's actually why they defined the Zone 2 boundary to be at the stream channel that's, 90 to 100 feet away west of MW1. But that's not the case today. Now we have beavers, and I don't know what the condition of that discharge is, but it's a much larger surface water recharge area around those wells.
Right. Yeah.
So if that helps you. But yeah, these are all these extra parts about groundwater flow and contaminant fate and transport, wetlands, standing water, surface water, groundwater. It's, it's called our natural environment.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of things we can talk about.
Yeah, and I think that's a reasonable argument to be made, but, and then again, it isn't something that we definitely know. And because of that, I think we're in the interest of reducing we're interested in our approval, avoiding creating situations where there's risk of
right.
making things worse rather than better. And so while I think that what you say is plausible, certainly, I don't find it convincing enough to make me not want to know more about either where the flow is going or to see the infiltration moved in some places where I can be more sure it's not going to flow.
All right, so, I mean, so I don't really consider myself expressing my interpretation. I'm actually considering like what the regulations say and what the rules are for like determining a Zone 2 boundary.
Right.
So in the world of like regulations and away from the side, like a bell curve, that center pole is the rules and regulations that we have to apply to. And then toward the edge of that are some natural fluctuations you might get in soil and groundwater conditions. Maybe the soil types vary. All these other things that can happen, or maybe someone's interpretation is different than the rules and regulations, the center of the pole and the more toward this side. And that is a bell curve. I mean, that's our population dynamics too. That fits. But I think it casts a really broad net, too, in terms of what comes before the planning board, in terms of where they can go and what topics they can cover and how much time it takes. I think you need to consider that, too, in terms of the amount of effort that we've taken on your behalf, or Board of Health's behalf, for a residential property, which, we don't have any sources on the property of contamination that we know of, and residential properties are treated with care by the state in most regulations, particularly when you're talking about PFAS, and that's their consumer products that everyone uses and has been for many years. It's just a really touchy ground to be on, Joel, and you need to tread carefully, just because it's still an evolving regulation too. So I'm going to follow up with Rob, see if I can. There's a point that he had about this upcoming potential EPA new standard that's coming out. My interpretation of that, Rob, is that it's going to be applied more toward water treatment plants in terms of the treatability of the water they provide to their customers, and not an MCP property by property basis. Because I mentioned to Rob, this is just some context. I mentioned the 90 nanograms per liter as being fairly consistent with my review of like regional background, and you have to dig into it because there's a lot of data out there, and I talk about that in my letter. But I'm losing my point again. I should actually rely on Christine to help me out, but that's what happens. So, as LSPs, being challenged with this in terms of how do we follow these regulations and what constitutes background. Some of the LSPs just basically raised their hand and says we should start doing our own testing. And so, as a professional organization, I mentioned this to Rob, and he's on our website, and the professional organization's website. The LSPs set out and did wet and dry deposition for PFAS on their properties. And, it mostly included where most people lived, which is kind of toward Boston and the coast, But there were some people from Central Mass and Western Mass. And the highest concentration of PFAS was actually in Chelmsford. It was 8 nanograms per liter. This is just rainwater. And it varied by type of rain event, the different type of storm events. And it did tend to concentrate more toward the coast, which is what we have our cloud formations tend to do. So, we are looking at something it's very dispersed. It's been around for a long time. It has residential kind of graces, I would say, in terms of a regulatory perspective. I think importantly from a political perspective too, because you can't have every resident going through what my client's doing for this residential property. The other thing that surprised me is how many residential properties are actually in the aquifer protection districts within Chelmsford. Like maybe 30% of the homes in Chelmsford. I mean, I was shocked. I thought there might have been like one or two like us, that I could look at for a reference point. There's many. And I think the most important thing, I mentioned this to Rob, is that people need to focus on, like I think EPA is doing, what are the most controllable ways of limiting risks to people, and that's by increasing the treatability of the water. And they back that up with significant amounts of funding. I was hearing billions, which I still think is coming up short. But that's how they do things, because PFAS and other things like that are only a risk if you're exposed to them. And the primary exposure pathway is drinking water. That's why there's a significant difference from 40 million nanograms per liter, just where we are, outside NW1, and 20 nanograms per liter inside the Zone 2, because they recognize that in a drinking water area, the risks are higher. But the corollary to that is, do you chase after every property? and there's a lot of them in Chelmsford and many other towns? Or do you basically look at it and say, and take the assistance from the federal and state government to increase your treatability of that? And it's fairly treatable. It's readily treatable. It's a lot of money, but, so that's how they're attacking it. And I think that's a prudent approach, not piecemeal, holistically.
So given all of that, I think the applicant's initial hydrogeo study shows flows in a specific direction. Our peer reviewer indicates that there are some concerns with that. I personally would like to see that infiltration moved to a different location on the property.
You'd like to see what?
See that infiltration unit move to a different location on the property.
Well, it is what to see. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'll be here if you need to be.
For the record, Brian Goodger with Hancock Associates, just so I'm clear, we're talking about underground system 2 only?
That one there, yeah.
Yeah.
And the preference for the location would be anywhere on site except for where it's currently located. What we would look to do, and we've done some preliminary kind of evaluation on ways that we could consolidate systems. And something that we've identified is potentially shifting underground system 2 to where the infiltration basin is behind the building in the initial build-out condition, or the underground system in the full build-out condition. It's in the same location. If we were to move that underground system by monitoring well 1, to behind the building, would that alleviate the concerns of this board?
I'd be interested in Rob's opinion on that.
I'm just trying to understand, when you say behind the building, I wonder if you could help me out, or maybe show on your screen where exactly we're talking about.
So this is the system that is currently concerned.
Yeah.
We would be looking to consolidate it to the system back here.
So for that location, so that's certainly, I think that's better. I mean, the highest levels PFAS are certainly at MW1. I think the levels at MW5 are unknown at this point. Monitoring wells dry, those samples could be collected. The nearest wells, MW2, and I've got a concern about that, basically, and I respect, what Jonathan has indicated. We have a federal MCL that's in force. We do not have revised standards. However, EPA has indicated that there's an individual maximum contaminant level for PFOA of 4 parts per trillion. It's a pretty low level. MW2 shows, it exceeds that. So these are sort of lower concentrations, but we do have certainly, there appears to be some lower levels of contaminants that, and again, right now, we don't have that standard, but the department is working on that, and certainly, they generally incorporate that into their GW1 standards.
Rob, what are your feelings about the gradients around MW5 versus MW1? I mean, those are closer. I mean, do you have a better feeling that is a gradient that you'd have greater confidence in?
It does seem like a steeper gradient in that location. I think that certainly that would help.
And if it was down gradient of MW2, then that would also be a little bit better. So that's why I was thinking the proposal of moving that, whichever that one is on the north side, and moving it to the back of the building would put it down gradient of at least the places where we've observed it.
What do you mean as a steeper?
It's Well, the contours are like a topo map, you know, so when they're further apart, it just means it's more level.
Okay.
And then as they get closer together, it means it's steeper, only now we're talking about going down.
Down.
Groundwater.
So it's fairly level, and then it starts to
Yeah,
drop
no,
down.
just because, and again, I just drive by it every day.
Yeah.
And, I don't know, like, you guys have like measured, that you guys have gone out on the property, walked it, and made sure that it's not, like, what this is, what we see here is accurate. Just because I've been driving by it, and I'm like, that property looks like it's really, like, it doesn't look like there's much dry land versus what we're seeing on the map. I keep looking at the map, and I'm like, okay.
This is underground,
This is underground, but I'm like,
and you're talking about surface.
there's a
Two
lot
different
of water
things.
over there.
Yeah.
A lot of water over there. I'm questioning whether or not a building can fit on it, but I just want to make sure you guys have like walked it and measured that there's enough land, because like I just have fears of Executive Drive in Chelmsford, remember? When it was built and every spring, the parking lot
But
got flooded?
in the case of Executive Drive, in their plan, they actually knew that they were putting that parking lot in floodplain. They actually knew.
You were on the board at the time.
No, actually I wasn't, but when we were looking at old plans, actually I was on the board when
Yeah, I
we
thought you
walked
were.
it. But it was the decision before that. It was when they actually first put it in.
Right.
And they knowingly, willingly put a parking lot in what they knew would flood.
Okay,
And guess what? It floods.
okay, I'm just, my observation, just buyer beware, like, make sure.
So
you-
are we proposing that we're gonna get more information, or are we proposing a revision of the plan, or both?
Well, we've raised our concerns, and Brian asked about proposing moving the infiltration to consolidate it with the one behind the building. Rob and I were discussing the fact that because we have greater confidence in those contours, the gradient contours, that you would say it's fairly safely down gradient of the places where we've identified areas that we know are not regulatory contamination, but are of sufficient level, if they were in Zone 2, that they would be. And so for that reason, that would give us I'll speak for Rob here, but that would give us a little bit better confidence that we, by approving this plan, we would not be resulting in any sort of additional potential spread of something into the Zone 2. So if that's what you're proposing, then that to me at least sounds like a good thing to do.
Okay. So also for clarification, what is the process going to look like? So Marshonda Associates had reviewed the stormwater originally. Would this go back to Craig to be reviewed for the planning board? If we're proposing changes, we'd like to get it wrapped up and then everything done for our next hearing so we can continue forward progress here.
Is that the consolidation of the infiltrator? That does not change the curb line?
Changes nothing on the site.
It doesn't impact turtles or anything like that?
No.
I mean, I would think the fact that because you're consolidating it, you're essentially already have a sort of review of your location of it there. That sort of expanding that, to me, seems like a reasonable thing to do without necessarily requiring peer review of that.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's what I heard. Do you want-
should we continue the public hearing until we have a chance to look at the updated infiltration system proposal?
Will June 12th be enough time?
It will. So we'll be able to issue our revised plan set and supporting calculations to the
Okay,
board.
that's what I was going to ask for, the supporting calcs.
I know your expertise, so, and you're guiding by you guys, okay? Do you have any other concerns that we have, anything else that we have not mentioned tonight? Because it just seems that new things are coming up, and from my take, but I know it's in the aquifer, and we're going off of what your expertise is, but if there's any other concerns that you have with this plan, we should tell the proponent tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Otherwise,
I don't-
this is it, right? This is the last item.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're continuing simply to get the revised plan.
Yeah, I had one other thing, though. The O&M plan and the long-term pollution prevention should have the snow storage section added to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the version that I'm seeing here was, I think, March 27th, which was right around the time we were having our last meeting about that specific topic, and I don't think that ever got
Into the plan.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree, so I'll look at my notes as well to make sure that we picked
Okay.
up our conversation.
So maybe we could think about having a draft decision for the next meeting, assuming that this is able to be,
We already have one attached to the agenda. It takes
Right,
back
right.
some time, but, you know, we'll
So-
refresh that. And you're meeting with the commission the night before.
Yes, we will be. We're continued to the 11th.
Okay.
And Brian, it's not just the snow, but there was a few other things from that March 27th meeting.
If you would like to reiterate those, I'm sure I have
Okay.
them in my notes, but just so I'm clear.
The snow storage section, the
signage.
any place where there's explicit instructions for the O&M about something related to the isolator rows or any technical, instead of just mentioning that the procedures are attached, specify that the manufacturer regular inspection, maintenance, and repair procedures must be followed, and then see attached. And then truck trailers also not permitted in other spaces other than loading dock spaces, I think was the other thing we had talked about.
Yep.
All right. I'll make a motion to continue this public hearing till June 12th.
I'll second.
Motion by Anita, second by Mike. Mike Raisbeck, all in favor?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye. Aye.
Unanimous?
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Very much.
All right.
There's still no one here from Middlesex, so my suggestion is we continue that.
Yeah. I'll move to continue 110 Middlesex until,
Wait, hold on a second. So what do we have on the 12th?
Yeah, well, maybe we should continue it to the one after the 12th, to the
We could.
26th.
Yep.
You've what you continued tonight, which are fairly minor, as I understand it.
Yeah.
Hildreth, yep, and then 110 Middlesex.
The whole town's watching.
I think we should move this to the 26th. I make a motion to move, what is this called? 110 Middlesex Street to June 26th.
26th? That's fine, I'm good with that. Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay.
Next up, we have, I think, are we to liaison assignments? Yes. So we didn't vote after the election yet on liaisons. It's still the same board. I don't know if people have interest in switching. I would like to go back to, I was originally going to do the Housing Advisory Board, but then they met in the middle of the day. And now they're meeting in the late afternoon, so I can make late afternoon meetings. I can't make middle of the day meetings. So I would like to
Okay.
take that back if that's okay.
That's fine.
So we have Paul on Center Village. Paul, I know you guys have a big load doing the village master plan revision, or the Center Village Overlay District, rather. Are you willing to continue on that project?
Yes, and then the Open Space and Recreation Committee is quite intensive. So I have two that I'm good with right now.
Okay. And then North Village,
I'll do it.
continue.
Another year.
Master plan implementation,
I'm perfectly happy to continue. We're actually
Okay.
making some good progress over there.
good. Strategic plan,
Sure, I'll take that. I think
unless
that
somebody
one's-
else,
yeah.
if somebody else wants to speak up about that, they want to take something else over. I'll do housing advisory,
I'll stay on
and then we also have, community preservation isn't on that, but that's a voting appointment.
Yeah,
John, you've been doing that, you
Yeah,
want to
I'd
continue with
enjoy
that?
doing if nobody
And then
else-
Anita, you want to continue with NEMCOG?
Yep.
All right, and then the non-voting appointments, I know, Chris, you've been doing conservation, historic, I don't know,
I think Nan, when Nan was on the board, she wanted
yeah.
to, and the board said
All right,
fine.
I mean, I can do that.
It may not be as critical. I mean, if
Right.
Nana was more important to her, I think.
I don't know that anyone's been, I mean, I go to ZBA sometimes or watch them on telemedia, but I didn't realize we had a
John's been
liaison
going.
to
You-
them.
I don't,
John?
I've been,
Oh, is
I
that
missed
you?
a couple of
Oh,
meetings, but I
sorry.
have, yeah, I watched them.
Well,
I'm getting called out.
I'm thinking with the potential for the 40B, that may become a little bit more
More of a hot
significant for a
spot,
little
yeah.
while.
I mean, I assume that people on this board are gonna have interest in some of the 40B
Yeah.
proposals anyway,
So
as
we ought to have somebody on the
citizens.
ZBA.
John, I can also switch it with you. If you can't make
Okay.
one, just give me a call.
All
If I
right.
can make
Yeah.
it, I'll do it. I like, because they're at night, so I
Yeah,
can.
and I
do
could
nights.
also,
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually try and keep an eye on that anyway. CEAS, the energy stretch, et cetera.
I don't know if that's critical, but I just put it on there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe on that, we can do that on an as-needed basis. I mean, I know that the chair sometimes will call me when he has a question, and
That's as needed, yep.
Board of Health has been Joel and Anita kind of going and watching them wrestle their paper.
You having fun with them?
I just went once.
I'll continue to go.
Okay. And then Chris, you're continuing as conservation. I know Joel, you're usually there as well.
Yep.
Oftentimes.
All right, do we have
That's
any,
just because
is
of
that
the-
okay? Does
the
everyone
vote.
know what they're supposed to be doing
Yep.
and comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Any liaison updates?
From the north, just, I mean, it was just a milestone that they've always wanted, out of Vinyl Square, to Williamsburg sidewalks. So they have been started by the state.
Oh,
Great.
nice. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
great news.
So it's underway. That came out this week. So.
Great news. Anyone else?
Well, let's see, I can tell you that a strategic plan, we have a contractor in place, and we've started to engage with them on how they're going to prepare the strategic plan. It's just getting started now, but it's looking pretty good. And master plan's actually been really quite active. I have to hand it to Scott Rummel. He's taken all of the things in the master plan and put them in a very good spreadsheet. And we're going down it, down that list, interested party by interested party and asking questions.
And just to add to that, your June or July meeting, will have that on your agenda.
I was gonna ask if we could put
So I
that
think
on
the
an
master
agenda
plan-
soon.
The Master Plan Implementation Committee is likely going to ask for a planning board update in August, September.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, anyone else? John or Chris?
Now, the Conservation Commission's winding down most of their big projects, just like we are starting to. So they're happy about that.
Go out and
as
chase
well.
turtles for the summer.
There will be an open space recreation plan public session on June 20th from 5 to 7 at the senior center. It's more of like an open house style, rather than a formal presentation. I'll send out a flyer to the board on that.
Okay. We had talked about making a punch, having people come up with a couple ideas for a punch list in terms of zoning priorities. Do people have, are you ready to talk about what you're interested in? Should we just take it around, Mike?
What am I interested in on a punch list?
On a punch list for zoning areas, we had
I-
talked about, looking back at areas of conflict and kind of what we think are
Well,
priority.
I'm kind of interested in looking at areas where the zoning on the ground is way out of whack.
Right.
With the zoning and the rules, and and perhaps trying to do something to bring them in a little closer. I realize you're not going to make it perfect, and I realize, of course, that we do have, grandfathering that supports the uses that are already in there, but it would be nice if the discrepancy were 30%
Managed.
instead of 70%, which I think is what it is now.
Do you have any particular areas that fit that bill for you?
Well, somebody probably ought to take a look at the zoning in the Westlands and see if that's appropriate, because there's an awful lot of very small lots over there.
Okay.
I mean, it was clearly not designed for 1 acre lots.
Right.
And if we had something that reflected that.
Okay.
I don't know, it may be such a headache that nobody wants to do it, but.
Well, it's worth taking a look at. John?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the discussion that came up months ago when we first started looking at MBTA, so we talked about kicking around, could we look at doing something to encourage different areas that may have issues, may not be at their highest and best use. I'm thinking like, we didn't want to go with the MBTA routes. I'm thinking like the Radisson property,
Right.
possibly the mall, if that falls into vacancies ever occur there again, and it doesn't look like it's very viable. I mean, it's operating now and it has numerous tenants, but I think something like that we talked about, so.
Yeah, we had talked about village
Yeah,
zoning
village
with like
zoning.
commercial or retail on the first floor and residential upstairs and what that,
Well, I believe if I'm correct, and you would probably know, isn't the Center Village
yeah.
group
I was-
looking
right.
at
So
something
I was-
akin to village zoning
That was what
now?
I was gonna say, is that they're doing that for the center village, and I think that might serve as a
Good model.
model for other village areas. And so we might want to participate in that process. Paul is.
Yeah.
Okay. Anita?
Yeah, I wanted to look at, where Lockheed Martin is.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
IM.
South
Because
Chelmsford?
that's zoned IA. That's very specific, but that's zoned IA, and obviously doesn't match what IA for the rest of the town is, right? I think we
Yeah.
need to look at that and zone it something that is more appropriate for that area, because
Right.
Lockheed Martin, it'll be grandfathered anyways, that property, but I don't think it should go under what everything else is for
Yeah,
IA.
that was definitely spot zone.
Is that spot zoning. The other thing, I'd like to look at the 129 overlay.
The 129?
Yeah, because I don't think we allow retail in there currently. And-
Is limited. Well, you have the amenities.
Because I'd
stuff.
like to look at something, if you look at the Linfield Marketplace.
Yeah.
I'd like to look at and this is actually my son, my 18-year-old son, is like, Mom, and he's been hounding me for a year and a half about this, about making 129 more like Linfield Marketplace, if there's a way to incentivize. Just a thought, to
Yeah.
throw that out there.
Yeah.
And then looking, and then the other thing is, with the housing shortage, we currently, and I'd like to get the numbers, but in RC, we incentivize conversion, people buying single-family homes, and developers buying single-family home, tearing them down and building two families because of the way our zoning is, because it's more economical. You can build a two-family on 20,000 square feet versus a single-family needs to be on the 40,000 square feet. And this is problematic because the developers are outbidding, individuals, right? Young couple just starting out in life may want to buy a fixer-upper.
Ranch, yeah.
Right, and they can't because it's more cost-effective and a developer can pay more for it. So that's why we're seeing right now, we're incentivizing it. And I think with our school capacity, our sewer capacity, we're at a limit. And I'd like to not incentivize that. So that would be something I'd like us to put on the table.
Maybe we could get some guidance on that from NEMCOG.
Yeah, I'm particularly concerned about putting in, I know the state's doing this, is looking at ADUs and stuff like that, and that concerns me because I think all it does is incentivize developers to outbid young couples who want to come in. I don't think it fixes their problem, but, and that's it. Sorry for a huge list, but.
So I'm just going to repeat a couple of things. I mean, the Radisson area, I agree. I think that, when we talked about, when we looked at the MBTA communities, we looked at multiple different sites. I think as a board, in the long term, we need to think of 110 and 129 areas. And 129 has stalled for a long time. So I think we need to revamp that overlay,
Yeah.
especially on 129.
Yeah.
And then I think you need to talk about putting an overlay on portions of 110 and incentivizing what you want it to look like as, commercial on the first floor with residential on the second floor, taking into account our sewer capacity issue, but, So that's something I think, it's just a repeat of what was already suggested, but I think it's areas that we should focus on.
Joel?
I was going to say what John said, but he said it much better.
Okay. Chris?
I think we should pick the SAID overlay back up, looking at the details of that. And then also looking at River Neck as one of the priority conflict areas, taking care of that.
Paul?
He's not on anymore.
Oh.
Game's over?
All right, so my couple senses, I don't know if we can do this, but I would really love it if we could sit down with the neighborhood and talk with the neighborhoods for properties that we've identified. For instance, Maxwell's, for instance, River Neck. River Neck, maybe it's a day late and a dollar short, but what would they like there? They're not going to sit vacant. So if there's some way we can figure out what the community, the neighborhood and the town in a more broad sense would like to see there, and we could somehow incentivize that, if we can come up with some brainstorming good ideas. And then I also, I think that one of the things in this proposed guidelines for the ADU is that they do say that we could look at setbacks and reasonable zoning guidelines. And I think we should look at our guidelines and try and figure out, if there's ways that it should be tweaked, that we could maybe achieve outcomes that we're a bit more seeking. And then I think, well, I don't know. I guess that's it. The village zoning was my other thing, but that's kind of already being covered.
I like your idea about the neighborhood engagement, and I think especially for like the Maxwell, like that area, I think we should definitely reach out to that. And I think that might be an easy, quick fix too, right? I don't think that necessarily could be, like, I like to move some stuff forward, especially for fall town meeting. Like to have little quick wins too, if we can, and then the larger projects.
Okay. New business, so maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll write these up and send them around, and people can pick their top out of the list, pick their top 2 or 3, rank them, and then we can take a vote, like, that will serve as like a vote of which ones we should tackle first, and pick 3 to take on in a work session or 2. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and then we have our proposed lighting bylaw. Everybody have a chance to take a look at that?
Just briefly, I haven't done
Me
it
too.
So we already have a lighting bylaw?
We do.
We do. So this is just replace it?
It's more towards like LED and,
And is this a planning board, or is this?
Yeah, well, it'd be a bylaw
it's-
change,
it
so
would
we
be
would
a
wind up
zoning
with.
bylaw change. It's Kelly, who is a former planning board member, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't believe
No,
so.
he wasn't planning board, but
Oh.
he's
He
been
indi-
before us before.
What he
on
indicated
previous
was it's
lighting
currently
bylaw.
a zoning bylaw, but he's seriously considering taking it out of zoning and putting it into a general bylaw.
Yeah,
And he was looking for the board's thoughts on that.
Is he going to be joining us tonight?
No, we only put this on just because he submitted it.
Okay.
I think
Maybe
he's
we
looking
could try and
for,
have him come next time and give us a
I think
little
that he's looking for
presentation.
some direction. as
Yeah,
to
he's
how
Got
to-
a lot of
he's
questions.
a pretty good speaker and describes what he's interested in well.
What would be helpful
Very
if we
knowledgeable.
could
Yeah.
do, like a track changes to the current bylaw?
I think he's proposing to delete it in its entirety and adopt new.
Yeah.
Oh, I understand that
Looking
it's
for a comparison.
I just want to do it from a comparison
Yeah.
to see
Yeah,
what we're
I'm sure he
changing.
could do that.
It's just like
very
2 Word
easily.
documents, right?
Evan, just a question, is Kelly thinking by making it a general bylaw, is he looking for greater enforcement capability by the town? or-
General bylaw doesn't provide for grandfathering, so he'd be able, through a general bylaw, you can provide for a hard set horizon where all lighting fixtures would need to be converted to compliant.
Interesting. That seems like it would have some benefit. Okay, so we'll ask him for either of the next 2 meetings, what he can manage, and maybe put him on early in the night.
Yeah, and if you can just ask him to do the comparison too. That'd be great.
And then we had some minutes to review. Anyone have any edits? I
Good.
think that's a first, Chris.
Yeah.
Move to approve?
It was pretty good. I actually, like, it was,
I agree.
it's like, wow.
Were those the first AI that you're approving?
No, not the first,
Okay,
but
okay.
the
No.
first without edits.
Okay, so it's.
No,
No,
there
it's-
were
There was
one or
maybe
two
a
in the
couple
last
last
batch
week that had no edits
that had no
too.
edits.
Okay.
But you guys like what you're,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't have any edits, but I just wanted to say, like, since I couldn't speak through the microphone last time, I did want to thank Becky De Silva Condi for all at the last meeting, there was, I think it was like 5 or 6 sets of minutes,
Right.
so I just wanted to acknowledge that she did a lot of work to catch that up, so.
yeah,
the AI option is really helping out.
Good.
Good.
yeah.
Do we have a motion on that?
Yeah, I made a motion
Second.
to approve.
Mike made a motion. I need a second. All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I had a
That's
couple quick
6
things.
to 0, because Paul
Yep.
dropped.
Paul's gone, yeah. Paul is, so it's not unanimous. Paul's not on the call anymore. I had an invitation from, well, first I want to remind everybody about the meeting before the next meeting at the library of various town boards,
Municipal board thing, yeah.
starting at 6, going till, I think, 8, but we have our meeting, we're going to start our meeting next time at 7:30.
Correct.
So people can go for like the first hour plus and then come here. Also, I had an invitation from NEMCOG's head of, I don't know, Economic Development Manager to, at home in Greater Lowell. It's a strategy summit at the Lowell Senior Center on June 4th, so it's coming right up from 4 to 6 p.m. At the Lowell Senior Center. It's based to hear updates about housing needs analysis for Massachusetts and specifically for the Greater Lowell area. Trying to put in place or develop goals and strategies and a comprehensive housing strategy for,
Correct. Yeah, they're looking to just put some additional information on that. It's a regional housing plan, but NIMCOG is looking for common themes and strategies among the communities, the nine communities,
among what?
among their nine-member
Gotcha,
communities.
yeah. So I don't know if anyone has, I sent it to I forwarded the invitation to everybody maybe an hour and a half ago, well, an hour before this meeting, so there's a link to RSVP if you're interested in going. I'm gonna try and go, but I don't know, 100%. And then also, the select board is gonna take up at their next meeting the ADU issue, and they're gonna have the legislators present, and they wanted someone from our board to represent the board at that meeting, and apparently Pat said explicitly she only wanted one person, I think. I don't know if other people.
What day is it?
The next, just 2 weeks from last month, from this past
3 weeks
Monday.
from
I think it's
June
June
3rd?
3rd. Yeah.
I don't know if I can go on that day, but I'd like to go, but I'd like to speak as an individual, not as a planning board, because I have some things I'd like to stay.
And the third will
Yeah.
actually be at a conference.
I
just
don't know
out
if
of-
more than one person could attend, but she wanted only one person to be a spokesperson. I'll try and clarify that with her, because I think it's unfortunate if more people wanted to attend, that they couldn't.
Well, I'm not speaking, I'd like to attend, but as an individual,
Right,
yeah,
true.
and I think, and I do encourage people from the community to attend.
Right.
Because it's a huge opportunity. It's not an open. Yeah, come
Do
up.
you mind?
Yes, I thought, sorry, then I misunderstood. I thought it was a select board meeting.
Virginia Timmons, 28 Lovett Lane. The select board periodically, twice a year, we've been on a pattern where we invite our state legislators to come to one of our meetings and talk about priorities for the community. And so at our meeting on Monday night, one of our agenda items was what are the topics we want to talk to them about as a select board with the town manager. And one of those topics is the housing bond bill, and part of the housing bond bill are the ADUs. And so I had suggested that it would be good to invite representatives from the planning board to participate in that discussion. And that's when you got the note asking for a representative to come. So it's, nobody from the public is going to
Okay.
participate in the discussion. It's just a board discussion with the legislators.
Which will be not a public hearing, not a public conversation, but it will be taking place in front of the public.
It's a public it's part of
Right.
our public
It'll-
meeting,
right,
but it's
it'll be
not a
regular
public
meeting.
session.
It's not a separate meeting.
Right, right.
I mean, then I really would like to attend, because I've been talking to Simon Cataldo quite frequently. I think things are a pain in the ass right now, but, because sorry about that, but I've been calling him so much, but I do have concerns about whether or not we're incentivizing the correct behavior by this housing bill, and I want to make sure that they're, like, thinking about it from a financial perspective. In fact, I've been drafting something to send to him, so this would be a great opportunity to bring it up. June 3rd, what time? 6:30?
Their normal
They
meeting.
don't, they meet at 6, but I don't think it's an agenda created yet.
Sorry?
Our meeting starts at the regular time at 6, and there's no agenda yet, but I will say that usually when we bring the state legislators in, we put it right at the top of the agenda so they can come and go.
Okay, so
You don't keep them all night?
And Madam Chair, I just wanted to mention while we're on the topic of ADUs, when we can do it when we adjourn, but I have the letter, so before everybody
Yes.
goes,
Yes.
if
Yes.
those that wish to sign, we'll pass it around.
Yeah.
So Anita, are you asking if you can be the run representative?
I am.
From the planning board?
If you don't mind, if you guys don't mind,
Oh, I don't mind.
unless someone else really, really wants to go?
No, that'd be great. I think you'll do good.
I just want to make sure they're solving the right
Nice.
problem.
I like
That's
the
all.
way it came out.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll take a motion, unless anyone has anything else for new business.
Motion to adjourn, you looking for?
Second?
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
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 Look at that, 8:30.